Rain clawed at the windows of the Caldwell plantation, each drop echoing like the pulse of fear itself. Inside, the air trembled with silence until a flame flared, small, trembling, defiant. A woman's whisper broke through the storm. "Tonight, we vanish." Beneath the warped floorboards, a faint thud answered, a heartbeat in the earth. Wind howled as shadows danced across the walls, hiding secrets older than the house itself. Every creak, every breath carried a threat. One step too loud could end them all. Yet in that suffocating dark, freedom waited, fragile and fierce, glowing like that single, flickering candle. Morning arrived heavy with heat, pressing down on the land like punishment. Caldwell Plantation stretched as far as the eye could see, fields of cotton shimmering white beneath a pitiless Georgia sun, framed by the slow decay of a mansion too proud to admit its rot. Master Caldwell ruled it all with the certainty of a man convinced the world bent his will. His boots struck the earth like thunder when he walked among the rows, his gaze enough to quiet 100 souls. Behind him trailed silence, broken only by the snap of a whip or the rustle of frightened breath. To outsiders, the plantation was prosperity. To those within, it was a graveyard that still breathed. The enslaved moved like shadows, each carrying invisible chains heavier than iron. Yet even under Caldwell's gaze, whispers lived, soft, defiant murmurs of the vanished. A man gone before dawn, a woman's bed empty by sunrise. Some said they fled through the swamps. Others believed spirits had claimed them. Caldwell dismissed it as fantasy. But the overseers began to check the quarters twice before dawn. Amid the clatter of hammers and smoke from the forge stood Elijah, the blacksmith. His arms bore the marks of fire, his face the calm of a man who had learned not to speak more than necessary. Every strike of his hammer echoed with purpose, controlled, precise, unhurried. The others admired his quiet strength, though few knew how deeply he studied the world around him. While others saw a broken man, Elijah was listening. To footsteps on the wooden floors of the mansion, to the rhythm of patrols, to the sound of rain hitting the same patch of ground beside the smokehouse every time a storm came. Caldwell's overseers often praised Elijah's obedience. They never noticed how his eyes followed every lock, every chain, every movement of guards who thought themselves invisible. He repaired their tools, sharpened their blades, and filed their keys. They never wondered why he lingered near the cellar doors, nor why he memorized the creak of hinges. The slaves spoke of him in hushed tones. Elijah's touched, they'd say, meaning not mad, but marked, chosen for something none could name. When the night wind carried songs from the quarters, his name sometimes slipped between verses, wrapped in rhythm and faith. The children asked him if the vanished ones had found freedom. Elijah only smiled. "Freedom," he said once, "isn't found. It's built." The contrast between master and man burned like coal. Caldwell lived for domination, yet Elijah thrived on patience. Caldwell believed ownership eternal. Elijah counted moments, waiting for the one that would turn fear into flight. As the field shimmered under the blazing sun, a different kind of heat grew beneath the surface. Something quiet, deliberate, and dangerously alive. Rumors thickened. A footprint found where none should be. A missing lantern. A locked shed discovered open. Caldwell raged, accusing the workers of deceit, while Elijah stood among them, head bowed, face unreadable. In his mind, he marked another test survived. By dusk, the plantation sank into an uneasy stillness. The white mansion glowed in the fading light, like a ghost trying to remember it was once alive. Smoke from the forge curled upward, dissolving into the blood-red sky. Somewhere in that twilight between Whip and him, fear and faith, a plan took shape, born not of hatred, but quiet, relentless hope. And as darkness swallowed the field again, the whispers returned, low, secretive, unending. They spoke of a passage beneath the earth, of footsteps under floorboards, of the brave who walked through soil toward the promise of breath. Master Caldwell slept soundly that night, believing all was his. But beneath his very house, rebellion had already begun to breathe. By day, Elijah was nothing but a craftsman, a man whose worth lay in the clang of his hammer and the strength of his arms. He mended chains, fixed hinges, and tempered iron until sparks blurred his vision. To the overseers, he was obedient, methodical, dull. But when the sun dipped beyond the cypress trees and the fields turned silver under the moon, the rhythm of his work changed. What had been labor became study. What seemed submission was observation. The mansion above him creaked like an old beast, and Elijah listened. Every groan of timber, every echo through the floorboards was a language he was learning to speak. The cellar, where barrels of salt meat and wine sat undisturbed, became his map. When sent there for repairs, he'd drag his hand along the cold stones, counting the gaps between them, noting where moisture gathered and where the earth felt hollow. The ground whispered secrets to those patient enough to hear. He studied the soil the way others studied scripture. Clay mixed with sand beneath the kitchen wing, loose enough to dig. But deeper beneath the main hall, the ground hardened, dense and packed, likely reinforced to prevent collapse. He memorized these textures through the soles of his feet and the weight of his tools. He knew where water pooled after rain and where it drained fastest. Every detail mattered. Freedom required perfection. The irony of his skill was not lost on him. Caldwell praised his good sense for metal and his steady hand. He called Elijah's obedience a blessing. Yet the same precision that made Elijah valuable was the weapon that would destroy Caldwell's control. Each shackle Elijah mended taught him more about strength and weakness, how pressure cracked iron, how friction wore through the thickest links. Every repair whispered another truth. Nothing built by man was unbreakable. At night, in the blacksmith shed, Elijah would scrape lines into the dirt floor, a tunnel in miniature. He calculated angles using nails and twine, estimating how long it would take to dig 6 feet deep without collapse. He used rhythm to time his thoughts. The steady tap of metal cooling, the interval between footsteps of patrolling guards, the seconds between candle flickers. When you had no paper, no ruler, no freedom, time itself became your blueprint. The plan was not born in one night of inspiration, but over years of enforced silence. It grew slowly, the way roots crawl beneath a tree, unseen but unstoppable. Every punishment, every scream he overheard carved another layer into his resolve. He learned to wear calm like armor. He smiled when spoken to, nodded when ordered, prayed when watched. Beneath that quiet, a storm gathered. Caldwell's mansion was built decades ago by men just like Elijah. Their bones fed the very soil beneath its foundations. He knew that meant something. The earth was both grave and passage. The irony twisted sharp inside him. The same tunnels once used to store slaves upon arrival would now be their path to freedom. History itself would be reversed, one handful of soil at a time. He began small tests, dropping a pebble through a cellar crack. He timed how long until it hit bottom. Listening to the echo, he guessed the depth. He marked candle shadows to trace air movement. The faintest breeze told him where the earth might breathe. He tested the thickness of walls with light knocks of iron. The overseers heard only noise. Elijah heard answers. Evening after evening, he stored each discovery in memory, never writing, never speaking. Secrets he had learned survived only in silence. In the forge, his hammer struck a steady rhythm, a code only he understood. Every blow echoed with calculation. How far, how deep, how long? He began saving scraps of metal too small to notice, collecting them in the hollow of a fallen beam. Tools for freedom would not look like tools at all. A spoon here, a bent rod there. Each piece served a purpose in the unseen design. The tunnel existed only in his mind, yet it was already real enough to breathe. It stretched beneath the mansion, curving toward the tree line, ending at a marsh where the ground grew soft. Freedom would begin in darkness. When he lay in his cot each night, Elijah traced the invisible path above his head with his thoughts. The floorboards creaked differently near the pantry. The storm water drained slower by the north corner. He remembered it all. Knowledge, he realized, was not given. It was stolen, learned through pain and shaped in quiet defiance. And though no one saw it yet, Caldwell's empire had already begun to crumble, not from revolt or open fire, but from one man's mind, measured, patient, invisible. Elijah, the blacksmith, the obedient hand, was no longer a slave. He was the architect of freedom, designing his escape from beneath his master's very feet. Eleanor Caldwell lived in a mansion she never called home. The air inside was heavy with perfume and silence. sweet enough to suffocate. Once, she imagined marriage as escape. From cold New England winters, from her father's debts, from the polite cruelty of high society. Instead, she had traded one prison for another, gilded and crueler. Her husband's plantation pulsed with unseen suffering, a rhythm she tried to ignore but could never quite silence. Each morning, the cries carried faintly from the fields, and each night she drowned them in piano melodies that trembled under her own shaking hands. Caldwell adored control more than love. To him, Eleanor was decoration, another possession displayed between portraits and chandeliers. She played her role dutifully, gentle smile, quiet grace, polite words. Yet in private, guilt gnawed her bones. She avoided the workers' eyes, afraid of what she might see reflected there. Their silence accused her louder than words ever could. One evening, when thunder rolled across the plantation, she sought refuge in her sitting room. Lightning lit the shelves, catching the cracked edges of her favorite music box, a gift from her mother. She wound it, but the gears refused to turn. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. Beneath the gears, folded so tightly it might have been part of the mechanism, lay a piece of cloth smeared with soot. She unfolded it, expecting some servant's mistake. What she found instead stole her breath. Lines, careful and deliberate, stretched across the fabric. A map. It showed the mansion's cellar, the smokehouse, and beyond that, a winding line descending into earth. A tunnel. At first, she didn't believe it. But the markings were too exact, too purposeful. It was no child sketch. Someone had planned something extraordinary and dangerous. She pressed the cloth to her chest, heart hammering. Caldwell's voice drifted faintly from his study, the low growl of a man reading ledgers and counting human lives like coin. If he saw this, blood would follow. She could walk to him now, present the cloth, and be done with it. Her husband would praise her obedience, perhaps even smile. The world would stay the same. But something inside her hesitated. For years, she felt the invisible chains of her own life, chains of expectation, of obedience, of fear. Looking at the map, she thought of the people who lived in true bondage, and the thought pierced her carefully maintained numbness. She carried the cloth to the window, staring at the rain-slicked fields below. Lanterns glowed dimly in the quarters, flickering like trapped fireflies. She imagined Elijah's hands. She knew his name, though she rarely dared speak it. The blacksmith with quiet eyes, the man who never bowed lower than necessary. She had seen intelligence there once, sharp and restrained, and it had unsettled her. Now she understood why. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the room. She folded the map and hid it in her gown. For the first time in years, she felt her pulse with purpose. But with that came terror. Helping them meant betrayal. Silence meant complicity. Both could destroy her. When Caldwell entered later that night, smelling of whiskey and rain, she sat at the piano, pretending to play. Her fingers trembled on the keys. "You're quiet tonight," he said. She smiled faintly, eyes downcast. Beneath the hem of her dress, her hand clutched the folded map like a secret heartbeat. He kissed her cheek, cold and perfunctory, then left. She listened until his footsteps vanished. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Down in the cellar, water dripped steadily, marking time. Somewhere beneath her feet, soil waited to be moved, freedom waiting to be carved from darkness. And Eleanor Caldwell, mistress of the house, prisoner guilt, knew that one night soon she would have to choose, remain the silent wife or become a conspirator against her own blood. The night was thick and breathless. Cicadas sang in the trees, but their rhythm could not drown the quiet dread that hung over the quarters. The moon, veiled by drifting clouds, offered no comfort, only enough light to see shadows move between the shacks. Inside one of them, a candle flickered behind a cracked wall, its flame trembling like the hearts of those gathered within. 12 figures sat close, shoulder to shoulder, their faces slick with sweat and fear. Every sound, a creak in the floorboards, the howl of a distant dog, made them freeze. Elijah stood near the doorway, his voice low, measured. "We leave when the storm comes," he whispered. A murmur swept through the group. Some nodded, others trembled. For weeks, They had sung of freedom in code, words no master could decipher, hymns that carried more truth than prayer. Follow the drinking gourd. They'd hum as they worked in the fields, eyes fixed on the horizon. It meant follow the stars north. When they sang, wade in the water, they meant take the river path. Hide your scent from the hounds. These songs were their map, their courage, hidden in plain sight. Martha, the oldest among them, spoke next. Her voice rasped like dry leaves. You sure that storm's coming, boy? Elijah nodded. Tomorrow night, the wind will be wild. No one will hear us move. He unfolded a worn scrap of cloth, his hand-drawn map of the tunnel beneath Caldwell's barn. The others leaned in, breath held. The tunnel led beyond the cane fields, past the creek, into the forest. Freedom waited on the other side, or death. No one said aloud, but the choice was clear. Stay and die slowly or run and risk it all. Thomas, a younger man with eyes that burned, clenched his fists. They'll hang us if they catch us. They already hanging us, just slower, Elijah answered. At least this way, we choose the rope or the road. Silence followed. The only sound was the hum of their fear, and the faint echo of hope behind it. From outside came a sudden gust of wind. The door rattled. Someone gasped. For a moment, every head turned, expecting the overseer's lantern, the heavy boots, the chain. But it was only the wind, testing their nerves. Martha began to hum, softly at first, then stronger. Swing low, sweet chariot. The melody wrapped around them like a prayer. The candlelight flickered against their faces, worn, scarred, but alive with something defiant. One by one, they joined in. The sound was low, trembling, sacred. That song wasn't for heaven. It was for the road north. Elijah felt a sting in his eyes. He looked at each of them, men and women who had lost everything but still dared to dream. Behind every whisper, every note, there was a story of survival. Sarah, who had lost her child to the auction block. Ben, whose back carried the memory of every lash. Martha, whose husband had vanished one winter night, never to return. Tomorrow, they would follow his footsteps. The candle burned lower. Elijah pressed his palm against the wooden table, feeling the grain of it, the same wood he'd carved for the master's furniture. Tomorrow, he said again, his voice barely a breath. When the thunder breaks, we run. Outside, the night swallowed their whispers. Inside, hearts beat in unison, a rhythm older than chains, stronger than fear. As they slipped away one by one, careful not to stir the dogs, the sound of their hymn lingered in the air. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried a promise, a covenant made in the dark. By morning, the shack would be empty. The overseer would find only footprints in the dust and a broken chain on the floor. And if he listened closely, he might still hear it, that quiet, trembling song fading into the trees. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for carry me home. Freedom was no longer just a word. It was a whisper that refused to die. The dawn broke gray and heavy, the kind of morning that carried no promise. Mist clung to the fields, wrapping the cane stalks in a pale shroud. The air was thick, not with heat this time, but with fear. Word had spread that the overseer, Mr. Harlan, was dead, found face down in the mud beside the barn, his throat cut clean. No one spoke of it openly, but in the quarters, the silence was louder than screams. Jonas sat apart from the others, his eyes darting between the shacks. His hand shook as he tore a piece of bread in half. Though he hadn't eaten since yesterday, he had told Harlan everything about the secret meetings, the whispers in the dark, the tunnel Elijah was digging. He had done out of fear, not malice. "They gon' get us all killed," he'd whispered to the overseer 2 nights before. "Talking 'bout running north. You best stop 'em." And now, the man he'd trusted to protect him was lying cold in the dirt. Elijah walked past, his face unreadable. The others greeted him with quiet respect, but not Jonas. He couldn't meet Elijah's eyes. Every time he tried, he saw the blood on his own hands. The field bell rang. Chains jingled. Life went on as if nothing had happened. But everyone felt it, the tension crawling under their skin. Who killed Harlan? Was it one of them? By noon, rumors had already taken root. Some said the master's horse kicked him. Others swore they'd seen a shadow near the barn before dawn. A few whispered that it was God himself who struck him down. But Jonas knew better. Or at least, he thought he did. That night, rain began to fall, slow and steady, tapping on the rooftops like fingertips. Inside his shack, Jonas sat awake, staring at the door. He kept hearing the same sound in his head. The overseer's last cough, the soft thud of his body hitting the mud. He hadn't meant for this to happen. He only wanted to survive. A knock came, soft, deliberate. Jonas froze. The door creaked open, and Elijah stepped inside. "You ain't sleeping much these days," Elijah said quietly. His tone was calm, almost kind, but his eyes were sharp. Jonas swallowed hard. "Just can't shake the storm sounds." Elijah nodded slowly. "Storm's got a way of digging up what we try to bury." He moved closer, the lamplight catching the scar on his cheek, a gift from the whip years ago. "You told him, didn't you?" Jonas's breath caught. I was scared." "Elijah, you don't understand. They catch y'all digging that tunnel. They kill us all. And what you think they do when one of us talks?" Elijah asked, his voice still low, still calm, too calm. Jonas felt his chest tighten. "You kill him." Elijah looked away, his expression unreadable. "Don't matter who did. Overseer gone. Tunnel still standing. That's what matters." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You best make peace with yourself. Jonas. Storm coming again tomorrow night. Some of us leaving. Some staying. You decide who you are before that thunder rolls." The door shut softly behind him. Jonas sat motionless for a long time, rain drumming louder on the roof. The candle burned down to nothing. In the distance, he could hear the faint hum of a song that Ole and the others always sang before danger. Wade in the water, he pressed his hands over his ears, but the melody seeped through the walls, through his bones. It sounded different now, not like hope, but judgment. By morning, the storm had passed, and so had Jonas. His bed was empty, his door wide open. Some said he ran into the woods. Others swore they saw him kneeling in the rain all night, whispering prayers to a God who'd stopped listening. No one ever found him. But when Elijah returned to the tunnel that evening, a small carving waited for him on the wooden beam near the entrance. A single word scratched in rough letters: "Forgive." Elijah traced it with his fingers, eyes heavy. The wind moaned to the tunnel like a ghost. No one ever spoke Jonas's name again, but his betrayal lingered like smoke, proof that fear could break even the bravest heart. And yet, freedom's whisper still rose from the dark. Not everyone would make it out alive. But the dream, the dangerous, fragile dream, lived on. Underscore. The earth was wet that night, thick, heavy, and full of secrets. Rainwater dripped through the cracks in the cellar ceiling, falling onto Elijah's hands as he clawed at the dirt. Each drop felt like a heartbeat, steady and defiant. The others worked in silence. No words, no grunts, not even prayers, just the scraping of spoons, the grind of stone, the sound of desperation shaping freedom one handful at a time. The cellar smelled of rust and sweat. Candles burned low, their flames trembling like frightened souls. Elijah pressed his ear to the wall. Beyond it, he could hear the creak of the master's floors, the faint rhythm of boots pacing. Every step above was a reminder of the world that owned their bodies but could not claim their minds. "Slow," Elijah whispered. "Feel where the soil breathes. Clay first, then sand. If you hit roots, stop." They dug with what they had. Stolen spoons, a bent horseshoe, a broken chisel smuggled from the blacksmith's shed. Their hands bled freely, but no one complained. Pain had become a language they all understood. At first, the tunnel was no more than a shallow wound and ground, but as the nights passed, it grew deeper, narrower, colder. The walls closed in around them, pressing close enough to taste the damp earth. One by one, they took turns crawling through, digging another inch, another foot. Each candle burned for exactly 30 minutes. Elijah had measured it. When the flame reached its end, they would stop, cover their tracks, and vanish before dawn. Every detail mattered. Every sound could mean the whip, the chain, or the gallows. On the 5th night, the ceiling trembled. A chunk of earth fell, snuffing out a candle. Panic rippled through the tunnel. "Don't move." Elijah hissed. "Hold steady." They froze in darkness, breath shallow. The air felt alive, thick, watching, waiting. Then, slowly, the tremor settled. Someone began to sob softly, but Elijah placed a hand on their shoulder. "Not yet," he said. "We cry when we reach the air." That night, Eleanor appeared at the cellar door. She wore a shawl over her white nightgown, her face pale against the candlelight. In her hands, she carried a small basket, bread, a flask of water, and 2 new candles. Elijah looked up, startled. "You shouldn't be here." "I heard the dogs barking," she said. "I told them it was a wind." She knelt beside him, lowering her voice. "How far have you gone?" 30 feet, Elijah answered. "Past the well near the oak roots. Another week, maybe 2. Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "You're risking everything." "So are you," he said. For a moment, neither spoke. The flicker of the candle between them painted their faces in gold and shadow. She looked at his hands, raw, dirt-caked, trembling, and something in her chest twisted. "My father once said freedom is the birthright of all men," she whispered. Then he sold his soul to the cotton fields. Elijah stared at her, unsure whether to trust pity from the house of his oppressor. But when she reached out and placed a candle near the tunnel's mouth, he saw not pity, but purpose. The nights that followed blurred together. The tunnel deepened, branching like veins beneath the land. The air grew hotter, thinner. Their lungs ached. Their knees scraped raw against stone. Sometimes the candlelight would flicker and fade, leaving them in total blackness. Just the smell of earth and the sound of their own breathing. In those moments, fear became almost sacred. It reminded them that they were still alive. One night, while the others slept, Elijah stayed behind to reinforce a weak section of the tunnel wall. He pressed a board against the dirt, hammering gently with the heel of his hand. Each tap echoed through the hollow, like a secret drumbeat. He paused, listening. Above him, a faint sound, maybe footsteps, maybe thunder. He couldn't tell. His heart pounded. If Caldwell found out, there would be no mercy, no trial, no prayer. Only fire. Elijah closed his eyes and whispered, "Lord, keep the earth quiet tonight." Then he kept digging. By the 10th night, the tunnel had reached 50 feet. It was barely wide enough for a body to crawl through. The air inside was damp, filled with the smell of clay and sweat. But when Elijah reached the end and struck his chisel into a softer patch of soil, a faint draft kissed his face. Fresh air. He froze, then smiled, small, weary, triumphant. The tunnel had reached the outer fields. Beyond the last wall of dirt was a forest, and beyond that, the river that marked the first step toward freedom. That night, he didn't tell the others. Not yet. He sat alone in the tunnel, running his hand along the rough walls. It felt alive, pulsing with every heartbeat, every prayer whispered in the dark. The tunnel wasn't just a path. It was a promise, carved by the broken for the brave. When Eleanor returned that evening, she found him sitting at the entrance, his face streaked with dirt and light. "It's ready," he said simply. Her candle flickered. The shadows on the wall looked like wings. She nodded, eyes full of something between fear and faith. Then may the storm come soon. And somewhere outside, thunder answered her wish, a low, distant growl rolling across the Georgia sky. Because freedom, like a storm, was coming. And nothing born of earth could stop it now. Morning rose over the Caldwell plantation in a haze of pale gold and dread. The fields were quiet, too quiet. The usual clatter of metal and the hum of tired voices had been replaced by a nervous rhythm. Glances traded like contraband, silence stretched too thin. Master Caldwell noticed. He always noticed. He stood on the porch, his cane tapping against the wood as he scanned the yard. His eyes were cold, the color of dull steel. A man who'd spent his life believing everything he owned, land, crops, people, bent to his will. But lately, the order he'd built had begun to fray. "Where's the hammer from the forge?" he barked. No answer. And the chisels? Gone too. The overseer stammered something about misplacement, but Caldwell's gaze cut him down. Misplaced? Tools don't walk away on their own. He turned, surveying the faces of his slaves. Eyes averted, shoulders tight. He could smell fear, thick as the morning dew. That afternoon, a bloodhound picked up a strange scent near the smokehouse. The dog whined, circling a patch of disturbed earth. Caldwell knelt beside it, pressing his gloved hand into the mud. When he lifted it, he found something small, almost meaningless, a fragment of iron shaped like the edge of a spoon. His jaw clenched. "No slave digs with silver," he muttered. The next hours moved like thunderclouds, dark and heavy. Caldwell ordered every worker lined up in the yard. The whip hung from his overseer's hand. But the real punishment was in the silence. "Something's happening here," Caldwell said softly, his tone worse than a shout. "You think I don't see it? You think I don't feel it?" No one answered. A few feet away, Elijah stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, eyes steady on the horizon. Caldwell's gaze lingered on him. That quiet blacksmith who rarely spoke but never trembled. The kind of man who made him uneasy for reasons he couldn't name. "Watch him," Caldwell said under his breath to the overseer. "He's too calm." That night, he prowled the halls of his house, candle in hand. The wind moaned through the shutters. The hound's paws scratched the floorboards as it followed him, sniffing. When they reached the cellar door, the dog froze, ears pricked, nose twitching toward the cracks beneath the wood. Caldwell stared at the door. The air was colder here. For a moment, he thought he heard something, the faint scrape of metal, the breath of earth shifting. Then the wind howled louder, swallowing the sound. He knelt, pressing his ear to the floor. Nothing, only the creak of old timber. Still, a seed of suspicion took root. The next morning, he ordered surprise inspections. Every shack, every shed, every inch of soil turned over. The overseers moved to the quarters like wolves, kicking open doors, scattering ashes, overturning barrels. Elijah watched from the forge, his heartbeat slow but hard. Sweat rolled down his temple as he hammered a horseshoe, each strike masking the tremor in his hands. The noise hid everything, his fear, his fury, his prayers. When the overseer passed behind him, Elijah didn't look up. Only when the footsteps faded did he allow himself to breathe. Caldwell stood by the veranda, scanning the plantation. The world looked the same, rows of cotton, bending backs, the hum of obedience, but something beneath it had changed. He could sense it like the moment before lightning strikes. The air charged, the silence too heavy. He turned to the overseer. "Double the patrols. If they're hiding something, I'll drag it out of the earth myself." That night, as the bloodhound howled at the edge of the woods, Elijah waited below, deep in the tunnel, listening. He could feel the vibrations of footsteps above him, the muffled bark of the dog. Every second stretched like a noose tightening around his neck. But he kept digging, because the closer danger came, the more certain he became of one truth. Freedom was worth dying underground for. The illusion of Caldwell's control was cracking, and somewhere in the darkness, the earth itself seemed to shift in defiance. The clock was ticking now, and both master and slave could feel its pulse. Underscore, 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 underscore. The wind had shifted by dusk, thick with the scent of rain and something else, smoke. Faint at first, like a ghost clinging to the air, then stronger, heavier, crawling through the darkness until it reached the heart of the Caldwell plantation. It began in the barn, a single flicker beneath the hay, then two. Within minutes, the fire was alive, orange tongues licking upward, devouring wood and straw, turning the night into a roaring furnace. The animals screamed. Bells rang. The overseers came running. Water! Buckets! Damn you! Caldwell shouted, his voice swallowed by the crackling roar. His cane struck the ground with fury as he stumbled through the smoke, barking orders. The bloodhound yelped, pulling at its chain. Chaos swallowed the yard. While everyone's eyes turned to flames, a shadow slipped beneath the house. Elijah. His body was slick with sweat, his lungs already burning from the heat. The tunnel's entrance waited, its mouth dark and breathing. He dropped to his knees and crawled in. The sound of the fire above became distant, a muffled growl through the earth. He pressed his palm against the dirt ceiling, feeling it tremble. Time was running thin. He worked fast, hammering planks into the fresh section of the tunnel, sealing its sides, packing mud to keep it stable. Every movement was agony, his arms heavy, breath shallow. Sweat dripped from his brow onto the soil. The candle beside him flickered violently, its flame shrinking as oxygen thinned. Then, from above, a voice, faint, desperate. "Eleanor! Elijah! Are you down there?" He froze, listening. The sound of splintering would echo through the floorboards. He crawled back toward the cellar, emerging half-covered in mud. When he looked up, he saw her through the rising smoke, clutching something small against her chest, her infant, red face and crying. She stumbled down the steps, coughing, eyes streaming from heat. "The fire's spreading to the house," she gasped. "They'll come here next. You have to finish tonight." He stared at her, stunned. "You'll be caught." "I already am," she said. Her voice broke on the words, but her eyes were steady. "I can't unsee what I've seen. I won't live in this house another day." For a moment they locked eyes, two souls from different worlds, bound now by the same flame. Above them, the ceiling thundered. Embers rained through cracks. "Elijah!" Another voice shouted from outside, Jonas, his face appearing in the narrow doorway. "The barn's gone. They think it's lightning. We've got minutes." Elijah turned to him. "Bring everyone. Tonight we finish it." Jonas hesitated, fear flickering behind his eyes. "Caldwell's out there with a gun. Then don't let him hear your heart beat," Elijah said. "Move." Jonas vanished back into the storm. Eleanor crouched, placing her infant inside a wooden crate lined with cloth, shielding it from the smoke. "When the tunnel opens," she whispered, "take her with you. Promise me." He nodded, though his throat tightened with the weight of that promise. Flames roared above. The floorboards glowed orange at the edges. Elijah dropped back into the tunnel, hammering faster now, his movements frantic but precise. Dirt fell into his hair, his eyes, his mouth, the earth swallowing him whole. Behind him, the others arrived, faces glowing with firelight, eyes wide but resolute. "Is it ready?" one whispered. "Almost." Elijah breathed. One more push. The air quivered with noise, the fire's hiss, the crack of timber, the distant shouting of Caldwell's men. Above them, the barn collapsed in a thunder of embers, sending a rain of sparks across the yard. Eleanor clutched her child tighter as she heard Caldwell's furious voice in the distance. "Find who did this. Every last one of them." But she didn't move. She knelt beside the tunnel entrance, holding the candle steady for Elijah as he carved the last inches through the open soil. The flame trembled in her hand, light spilling over his face, dirt-streaked, determined, immortal in that instant. And then, with one final strike, the earth gave way. A rush of cold air flooded in. Elijah looked up. "It's done." Eleanor smiled faintly, tears mixing with ash. "Then go, before the fire takes everything." He reached out, hesitated, then placed a hand over hers. "You've done enough," he said quietly. "Now you must survive." Their fingers parted. He turned and vanished into the tunnel, the others following behind him one by one, their bodies swallowed by shadow and hope. When the last candle flickered out, only Eleanor remained, kneeling beside the empty hole, the house collapsing in flames above her, whispering a prayer through the smoke. Outside, thunder broke across the sky, and the rain finally came, hissing against the fire, drowning the night in steam and silence. The world burned, but somewhere beneath it, freedom moved. Underscore, 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 underscore for days. The air had been too still, too heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Clouds gathered on the horizon like an army, dark and endless. Even the birds had gone quiet. The plantation workers felt it before they saw it. The low rumble, distant but growing, crawling across the land like a warning. Elijah stood by the forge, pretending to mend a broken latch while his eyes followed the shifting sky. He'd been waiting for this. The storm was both signal and shield. Nature itself was choosing sides. That night, the wind began to howl. Trees bent under the pressure. Lightning flashed across the fields, lighting up the cotton rows like pale ghosts. Each strike illuminated faces, frightened, hopeful, determined, before plunging them back into darkness. Inside the quarters, the others gathered. There were no words now, only movements rehearsed 100 times. Each person carried a token, a small mark of unity, a torn scrap of cloth tied around the wrist, a carved cross on the palm, a whisper shared like breath. When the thunder rolls twice, we move. Elijah crouched by the door, listening to the rhythm of the rain as it began to fall slow, then harder, until it drowned the world in noise. Perfect cover. He met Jonas's eyes across the room. The younger man trembled, but nodded. They had no more doubts left to spend. Eleanor watched from the veranda, her gown damp with mist, her infant cradled in her arms. From her window, she had seen them, the shadows slipping across the yard like pieces of the night itself. For the first time, she didn't turn away. She whispered a silent prayer, not for herself, but for the storm to be kind. By midnight, the sky had become a living thing, roaring, cracking open with light. The overseers huddled in the main house, too busy protecting the master's property from the rain to notice the movement in the fields. The bloodhound barked once, then whimpered, frightened by the thunder. Elijah signaled with his hand. The first group moved. Their feet sank into mud, but they kept low, sliding behind the smokehouse, past a ruined barn. The storm swallowed every sound, footsteps, whispers, even a faint cry of a child. Inside the cellar, the tunnel waited, dark, breathing, alive. Water dripped from the ceiling, soaking the boards. Elijah crawled in first, the candlelight behind him fluttering against the dirt walls. One by one they followed, their tokens glinting faintly when lightning flared outside. The deeper they went, the closer the storm grew. Each thunderclap shook the ground above their heads, dislodging bits of earth that rained down in soft, terrible patters. Fear pressed close, but so did resolve. Halfway through the tunnel, Elijah paused. He could hear the rumble of the river beyond the far wall, a promise waiting. But behind him, the sound of muffled crying. He turned. One of the younger women had fallen. Her foot caught in the soft clay. "Quiet," he whispered, helping her free. His hands were steady despite the tremor in his chest. "You're almost there." She nodded, tears mixing with mud. The tunnel groaned as if the storm above had found them. But still they crawled, through wet earth and darkness, through every fear that had ever chained them. Above ground, lightning struck the old oak near the fields, splitting it in two. Caldwell woke from his uneasy sleep, the thunder shaking his walls. He reached for his pistol, the unease from nights before flooding back. Something was wrong. Something was moving. He stumbled to the window, but saw only rain, thick and endless. The plantation was dissolving into night. Below, Elijah and the others reached the tunnel's end. The air was cold, sharp, free. He pressed his hand to the last wall of dirt and whispered, "Now!" Behind him, someone clutched the token tighter. A strip of white cloth turned gray with soil. They were ready. The sky tore open in a blinding flash, thunder following like the drumbeat of destiny. And as the first drops of rain bled to the tunnel's roof, Elijah struck his chisel one last time. The wall crumbled. Air rushed in. Freedom was a breath away, if they could survive the storm that came to hide them. Underscore, 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 underscore midnight. The plantation was drowning under rain. Sheets of water slammed against the rooftops, pooling in the courtyards, streaming down the cracked windows like tears. The storm had swallowed the world whole, and within that chaos, 12 souls prepared to vanish beneath it. Inside the cramped quarters, the air was thick with sweat and fear. The candle flickered wildly, throwing nervous shadows across mud-streaked faces. The floorboards had already been loosened, just enough to lift without a sound. Beneath them yawned the mouth of the tunnel, narrow and black, like a wound carved into the earth. Elijah knelt first. His hands were trembling, though not from cold. "Remember," he whispered, "no sound. Follow the candlelight. Don't stop till you feel the air change." Jonas nodded behind him, clutching the small wooden cross he'd carved weeks ago, a token, a reminder of something bigger than fear. The others stood motionless, rain hammering the roof above their heads like the countdown of fate. Then the candle wavered. Eleanor watched from the doorway, pale and drenched, her shawl clinging to her shoulders. She had come quietly, barefoot, so no one would hear her over the storm. In her arms she held a bundle of torn cloth, the list of names, scraps of maps, the carved symbols that marked the Allies, evidence of treason. She knew what it meant if they found her with it. When Elijah met her eyes, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The storm had already spoken for them. He nodded once, and she understood. It was time. Elijah pulled the floorboards free. A rush of cold, wet air rose from the tunnel. The smell of damp earth filled the room. Jonas lowered himself first, clutching the candle. Then 2 women followed, dragging small bundles of food tied in cloth. The rest came after, silent except for the labored breathing of those who'd waited their whole lives for this moment. Eleanor knelt beside the opening. Mud streaked her hands as she helped the last child through, a girl no older than 10. "Keep moving forward," Eleanor whispered. "Don't look back." The child nodded, her eyes wide with the reflection of lightning. Then she disappeared into the dark. When the last of them was gone, Eleanor began her work. She wiped the footprints from the floor. She scattered ashes from the fire to hide where the boards had been pried. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. She knew time was thinner than the candle's flame still burning below. Down in the tunnel, Elijah crawled on his belly, pushing forward to the choking mud. The air was thick, damp, alive with the sound of their movement. The candle Jonas carried ahead flickered violently, one heartbeat from dying. "Keep it steady," Elijah hissed, his voice swallowed by the storm above. Jonas coughed, his elbows scraping the dirt wall. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one man, and the weight of the earth pressed on their backs like the hand of death itself. Every few feet, water dripped from the ceiling, cold against their necks. Somewhere behind them, someone whimpered. "Quiet," Elijah whispered again, though his own lungs were burning. "We're almost there." He couldn't see the others anymore, only the faint orange pulse of the candle ahead. He thought of the fields above, of the whipping post, of every night he had stared into darkness and wished for light. Now he was crawling through it. The candle sputtered once, twice, then died. For a moment, the world disappeared. The tunnel filled with the sound of gasping. Someone sobbed. Someone prayed. Elijah reached forward blindly, his fingers brushing the wall. Then Jonas's boot. "Don't stop," he shouted, voice low but fierce. "Keep crawling. Follow my hand." They moved by instinct, one hand, one breath at a time. The tunnel narrowed, earth pressing closer. Mud filled their nails, their mouths. The storm above sounded like thunder inside their skulls. Then air. Elijah froze. It was faint, but real, the whisper of wind, the scent of rain unfiltered by soil. "Here," he said hoarsely. "We're close." He pushed harder, clawing at the dirt with both hands. His fingernails tore, but he didn't stop. The wall crumbled beneath him, and suddenly light, dim and gray, but light, poured in through the cracks. He broke through first, dragging himself out onto the wet grass, gasping like a man reborn. One by one, They emerged behind him, mud-streaked, shaking, eyes wide with disbelief. Freedom was not glorious. It was cold, it was soaked, it was trembling, but it was theirs. They huddled under the trees, thunder rolling overhead. Elijah turned back toward the plantation house. Distant now, a blur behind curtains of rain. Somewhere inside, Eleanor would be covering their tracks, sealing their passage with her own doom. He whispered her name, but the wind carried it away. Back inside, Eleanor was burning the last of the evidence. The smell of smoke filled the quarters. She could already hear the dogs outside, barking, restless. Someone would come soon, the master, the overseers, Caldwell himself. She pressed her trembling hands together, whispering a prayer she could barely finish. Her baby stirred upstairs, crying faintly through the thunder. When the door burst open, she didn't move. The men shouted, their boots striking the floor. Caldwell's voice was sharp, laced with rage. "Where are they?" Eleanor turned slowly. "Gone," she said. Her voice was calm. "And you'll never find them." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the broken oak tree, a scar against the sky. Beyond it, hidden by forest and storm, Elijah led the others toward the river. The rain beat down harder, erasing their tracks. Each flash of lightning showed them the path. Each thunderclap pushed them onward. They were free, not yet safe, but free. Behind them, the plantation burned. Whether by lightning or by the hand of fate, no one could tell. But to those who saw it from afar, it looked as if the heavens themselves had opened, as if God had marked the night with fire. And beneath that burning sky, 12 figures vanished into the storm, carrying the weight of every chain they had ever broken. Underscore, 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 underscore. The storm had not stopped. It roared like an angry god, tearing branches from trees and flooding the fields. But in the great house of Caldwell, a different kind of storm was breaking loose. Caldwell stood over the open floorboards, his boots slick with mud, the candlelight shaking in his trembling hand. The earth beneath gaped open, a hollow passage where there should have been solid ground. His voice was a growl. "They dug a tunnel," he said, "under my house." The overseers froze. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Caldwell snapped, "Bring the dogs!" Within minutes, the hounds were howling, their cries rising above the thunder. Rain lashed the courtyard as the men spilled outside with torches that hissed in the downpour. The scent of wet earth, sweat, and fury filled the air. Beneath the storm, Elijah and the others stumbled across the marshy field. Mud sucked at their feet with every step. Lightning ripped the sky apart, revealing their faces, soaked, terrified, determined. The tunnel had spat them out near the cypress grove, half a mile from the river, but the rain had turned the ground into a swamp. "Faster," Elijah urged, limping. His ankle had twisted climbing out, but he wouldn't stop. The others carried the smallest child between them. The girl's tiny arms wrapped around a man's neck. Behind them, the hounds bayed, closer now, savage and hungry. "Go!" Elijah shouted, turning back for a moment. His eyes caught the flicker of torches in the distance, glowing like hellfire against the storm. "Keep to the trees." They ran, barefoot, bleeding, breath ragged. The wind screamed through the branches, bending them low. Every flash of lightning revealed more of a nightmare. Shadows moving fast, dogs lunging through water, men shouting orders. Jonas slipped and fell, sinking knee-deep into the mud. "Elijah!" he gasped, clawing for grip. Elijah turned, pain flaring through his leg as he hauled the younger man up. "Don't look back," he growled. "Don't you ever look back." The others had reached the treeline. The storm masked their movement, but the hounds didn't care for thunder. They could smell freedom like blood. A bark exploded behind them. One of the dogs broke ahead, a massive black hound, teeth bared, eyes catching the lightning. It lunged. Elijah spun, grabbing a fallen branch. The impact knocked him backward, the branch shattering against the animal's ribs. He hit the ground hard, mud filling his mouth. The dog lunged again, and then Jonas struck from behind with a rock, wild and desperate. The hound yelped, stumbled, and vanished into the dark. Elijah! Jonas shouted. Move! They stumbled back to their feet, slipping through the reeds. The noise behind them grew louder. The men had reached the edge of the swamp. Caldwell's voice carried through the storm, cold and murderous. Find them, dead or alive. Elijah's vision blurred. His leg was bleeding now, torn open by the dog's bite. He could taste metal in his mouth, feel every heartbeat like a drum inside his skull. But the river was close. He could hear it, the rush of water, wild and rising. They pushed forward through the last of the trees, their bodies half submerged in the floodplain. The current ahead was fierce, swollen by rain. The others hesitated. We'll drown, one woman cried. Elijah turned to them, breath heaving. Then drown free, he said. Lightning struck a nearby tree, splitting it in half. The crash sent shock waves through the ground. For a moment, everything froze. Even the dog stopped barking. Then the thunder broke again, and the world returned to chaos. One by one, they plunged into the river. The current seized them, pulling them downstream. The storm tore at their clothes, their cries lost in the roar. Elijah waited and last, dragging Jonas with him. His wound burned, but the cold numbed it. Behind them, Caldwell reached the riverbank. The torches flickered over the water, but the storm had erased all tracks. The river churned, dark and endless. They can't have gone far, one man said. Caldwell stared into the black water, his jaw clenched. They'll wish they hadn't. But the storm answered for him. Another crack of lightning, another roll of thunder. The night had swallowed its fugitives whole. Downstream, in the shelter of an overturned log, Elijah clung to the riverbank, coughing, shaking. Jonas crawled beside him, eyes wide with disbelief. Around them, one by one, the others surfaced, alive. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the rain fell, steady now, washing the mud and blood from their faces. Elijah looked up through the canopy, toward the faintest hint of dawn beyond the storm clouds. They were free again, for now, but the hunt had only begun. The river was a monster that night, swollen, furious, alive. Rain pounded its surface in silver knives, and the current writhed like something sent from the depths of hell. Trees bent under the weight of the storm, their roots torn loose, their branches clawing at the sky. Elijah stood at the edge, water rushing around his legs, dragging mud and reeds into its pool. The Free State lay beyond that black torrent, invisible but close enough to taste. Behind him, the others hesitated. No bridge, no raft, just chaos. Lightning split the heavens, revealing Eleanor in the distance, clutching her crying infant under her cloak. She had followed them. Her silk gown plastered her skin, hair wild, eyes fever bright with purpose. "Go!" she screamed through the wind. "Don't stop." Elijah's heart twisted. "You shouldn't be here." "I won't let them take him," she shouted, tightening her grip on the baby. Her voice cracked with a mix of fear and resolve. "I can buy you time." The others stared, their faces pale and hollow in the stormlight. They knew what she meant. From the woods came the sound of pursuit, barking, shouting, torches flickering like ghosts between trees. Caldwell's men were closing in, their fury undimmed by rain. Elijah turned to the others. "We cross. Now." They formed a chain, hand to hand, bodies braced against the torrent. The current tore at them, pushing, pulling, threatening to break them apart. The cold was numbing, the noise deafening. A woman screamed as the water pulled her under, but two men grabbed her, dragging her back up with strength born from desperation. Behind them, Eleanor ran toward the burning torches, her infant wailing against her chest. She stopped at the river's edge but didn't look back. Her voice carried faintly over the storm. "Tell him his mother was brave." Then she vanished into the darkness, moving toward the shouts, away from freedom. Caldwell's riders burst through the trees, their silhouettes jagged against the lightning. They saw her, a lone figure clutching a child. Caldwell shouted her name, disbelief curdling into rage. Eleanor. She turned, her face pale but calm. "They're gone," she said, barely audible over the storm. And then the river exploded in a flash of light. A bolt of lightning struck the bank, throwing mud and water into the air. The shock wave silenced everything for a heartbeat. When it cleared, Eleanor was gone. The infant's cry faded into the roar of the river. On the far side, Elijah collapsed to his knees, coughing water from his lungs. The survivors dragged themselves onto the bank, gasping, shivering, staring at the wild river that had both tried to kill them and set them free. Jonas looked back toward the storm. She didn't make it. Elijah didn't answer. His body shook with exhaustion, his chest heavy with a grief too deep for words. He stared into the darkness where Eleanor had stood, where her courage had bought them their final breath of time. The thunder softened. The rain began to slow. Dawn's first light crept over the treetops, weak but certain. Elijah rose slowly. The others gathered around him. Torn clothes, bleeding feet, hollow eyes filled with disbelief and something new, a fragile, trembling hope. Beyond the tree-line lay a dirt road, muddy but open. A wooden sign leaned half buried in the earth. The letters were barely visible in the gray light, but Elijah could read them. Free State Border. He exhaled, the breath breaking into a sob that wasn't quite sorrow, wasn't quite relief. "We made it," he whispered. No one spoke. The wind carried only the river's endless murmur, a song of loss and deliverance intertwined. Behind them, the plantation burned unseen. The storm would erase every footprint, every trace of the tunnel, every secret whispered in the dark. Only the river would remember, and even it would keep its silence. Freedom had come, but at a cost none of them would ever forget. The storm had broken by morning, leaving the world eerily still. Smoke curled from the ruins of the barn, and the once proud Caldwell plantation lay shrouded in mist. Fields flattened, fences drowned in mud, silence heavier than any scream. The dogs were quiet now. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Master Caldwell stood at the edge of the cellar, staring down into the earth. The tunnel yawned before him, a jagged scar torn to the foundations of his home. The boards had been pried apart with careful precision, each marked deliberate, each cut a message. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the wet soil. For the first time in his life, the great man of the South looked small. He knelt and touched the edge of the opening, his fingers trembling. The mud was still damp, the air inside the tunnel cool and hollow. "They dug beneath me," he whispered. His voice cracked, swallowed by the emptiness. His empire, his control, had been stolen not by an army, but by hands that had once bowed before him. Behind him, the overseer stood in uneasy silence. No one spoke. There was nothing left to command, nothing left to own. Caldwell lowered his head, a broken man staring into the grave of his own tyranny. Miles away, the survivors stumbled through the wet grass of a foreign field. Their clothes clung to their bodies, their feet torn and raw, but the air smelled different here, lighter somehow. The sun crept over the horizon, painting the world gold. For a long time, no one moved. They simply stood, watching the light spill across the river they had conquered. Elijah looked back one last time. The plantation was gone from sight, hidden beyond the mist and miles of swamp, but he could still feel it. The chains, the screams, the earth that had swallowed their fear. He thought of Eleanor, of the infant she had held, of the moment she'd vanished into the storm. A part of him wanted to weep. Another part refused. Jonas approached quietly, his voice hoarse. "She saved us." Elijah nodded. "She did." His eyes stayed on the horizon. "Now we make it mean something." The others gathered around, their faces etched with exhaustion and awe. For the first time, there were no orders, no whips, no eyes watching from a house. Only the wind and the faint hum of morning insects rising from the grass. One woman knelt, pressing her hand into the soil as if to make sure it was real. "It feels alive," she whispered. Elijah smiled faintly, though his heart was heavy. "That's freedom," he said. "It breathes." The sun climbed higher, warm against their faces. For the first time in their lives, they were no longer shadows in someone else's world. They were human, bruised, battered, but unbroken. Back at the plantation, Caldwell remained at the tunnel's mouth long after the others had gone. His torch flickered, light reflecting off the damp walls that led deep into darkness. Somewhere beneath his house lay the remnants of a rebellion he had never seen coming. He tried to imagine the hands that had carved it, the quiet nights filled with whispers and courage. But he couldn't. When the torch went out, he didn't relight it. By the river, Elijah and survivors began to walk, slow at first, then stronger with each step. The sky turned from gray to gold, and the sound of birds returned to the world. The storm had taken everything from them, yet it had given them what they had never known, a beginning. And as the light spread, erasing the night, the story of the tunnel, of courage carved from despair, became legend, a whisper that would travel farther than any chain could ever reach. Time buried the Caldwell plantation long before the earth did. Seasons came and went. Rains washed the blood from the fields, and new roots grew where chains once fell. The house itself crumbled, brick by brick, until only its skeleton remained, a ruin swallowed by vines and silence. Decades later, when the land was nothing but overgrown pasture, a team of historians arrived. They came with shovels, journals, and quiet reverence, drawn by stories that refused to die. The locals spoke of songs carried on the wind at night, low, sorrowful hums that rose from the ground itself. Some said they were just echoes of wind through hollow earth. Others swore they were the voices of the freed. The historians dug carefully, layer by layer, until one morning a student's spade struck wood. The sound was soft but sure, hollow. Beneath years of soil and root lay a narrow shaft reinforced with rotted planks. The air that escaped smelled of clay and something older, almost sacred. When they crawled inside with their lamps, the tunnel stretched ahead like a vein through the earth, twisted, scarred, defiant. Along its walls were faint scratches, initials carved by trembling hands, symbols that no one could quite decipher. Each mark told a fragment of a story, a promise, a prayer, a declaration of existence. In one corner, they found a rusted spoon, its handle bent into the shape of a cross. Another held a shard of glass, its edge smooth from touch. These were not tools anymore, they were testaments. One of the historians, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, whispered, "They built freedom out of dirt." Her voice trembled, as if afraid the earth might answer. Word of the discovery spread through the nearby towns. Reporters came, then teachers, then school children. But there were no names to attach, no graves to visit. The people who had dug that passage had vanished into the river, into history, leaving only whispers. Eventually, the county erected a stone marker near the site. It bore no names, no dates, only a single line carved deep into its face. They vanished, but the earth remembers. At dusk, locals still came to stand by that stone. Some brought flowers. Others just listened. When the wind moved through the trees, a faint melody seemed to rise. The same hymn that once carried coded messages of hope. The sound was soft, barely there, but it lingered like a promise kept. Elijah's name was never written in any book. Neither was Eleanor's. But their story lived in the soil, in the stubborn wildflowers that bloomed over the ruins every spring, in the river that still whispered to the reeds. The land itself had become their witness. Generations later, children would ask about the old plantation at the edge of town, and their elders would lower their voices to say, "That's where the ground sings." The past had not vanished. It had simply gone underground, waiting to be remembered, waiting to remind the living that courage, once buried, never dies. Justice had come too late for them, but not for their story. It endured in the hush between songs, in the breath of wind through the trees, in every heart that refused to forget. And beneath the soil, where darkness once swallowed hope, something eternal still hummed, not in mourning but in triumph.